Vincent Carrington pressed his hand against the cool glass of the boardroom window as he listened to the last echoes of applause fade away. The room smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee, but he hardly noticed. By every measure, tonight had been a success. Its investors were pleased, the quarterly numbers looked strong, and the board members nodded approvingly at his confident words. Yet beneath his tailored suit and crisp white shirt, Vincent felt an old ache settle in his chest. He closed his eyes for a moment and remembered a very different kind of boardroom. One that had no bright lights or soft carpets, only the empty corner of a drafty church hall, where a small group of neighbors once met every Christmas Eve. He was a boy then, clutching the hand of a distant aunt who barely spoke to him except when she needed help carrying packages of used clothing. He remembered the hush that fell as candles were lit, the faint glow casting long shadows on dusty walls. Instead of feeling joy, he'd felt small and unseen, as if the flickering flames were a reminder that he belonged nowhere. The chairman, at the head of the table, cleared his throat and offered Vincent a polite nod. Vincent nodded back, his practiced smile in place, and gathered his papers. His phone buzzed quietly in his jacket pocket. Messages from his assistant, from his children, from his personal trainer. He didn't answer any of them, tucked his phone away, and allowed the staff to lead him to the side exit. The office. Party was in full swing behind him, but he slipped past without a word, preferring the hush of the empty hallway. Outside, the winter air hit him like a wave. Snow fell in thick, slow flakes, blanketing the city street in a soft white. The streetlights glowed through the falling snow, making each flake look like a tiny star drifting down from the sky. Vincent felt the chill reach his bones, but he breathed deeply anyway. There was something peaceful about the night, as if the world had paused for a moment to remember how to be still. He walked across the plaza to where his car waited at the curb. The driver, a tall man with an easy smile named Marcus, slid out and opened the rear door. Vincent climbed in and closed the door behind him. The seats, upholstered in dark leather, warmed beneath him as Marcus clicked a button on the console. The door slid shut, and the engine purred to life. Vincent leaned back and stared out at the snowy street. Even here, surrounded by skyscrapers and bright billboards, he could see glimpses of simple joy. A family of 3 huddled together under a red umbrella, laughing as they shook the snow off their coats. A group of friends carried bags from a toy store, their arms weighed down by teddy bears and board games. A couple stopped under a street lamp, sharing a kiss as a snowflake landed on each of their noses. Everywhere he looked, there were scenes of warmth and connection. He felt a familiar emptiness settle over him. He could buy any toy, any house, any experience, but he could not buy the feeling of being truly seen by someone who loved him without reservation. He could not buy the comfort of a real home filled with laughter and the smell of a roasting turkey on Christmas Day. His life was filled with grand gestures, charity galas, luxury vacations, business expansions, but it had none of the small moments that make memory last. Marcus cleared his throat. "Anything I can get you, sir? A hot chocolate? Some cookies?" Vincent shook his head and forced a small smile. "No, thank you. Let's just head home." Marcus nodded and eased the car into motion. The soft hum of the engine mixed with the quiet jazz music playing from the stereo. Vincent closed his eyes again, letting the track wash over him. He remembered how, as a child, he'd sat in the back of an old station wagon driven by his aunt, their family's only holiday treat. He'd watched the snow outside the window, each flake a tiny miracle against the gray sky. There had been no music then, only the crunch of tires on ice and the distant call of a carol singer on the corner. He shifted in his seat, pulling his coat tighter around him. He was a long way from that boy now. His company employed thousands. His name appeared in magazines, and his house sat atop a hill with a view of the river. But no title or fortune could soothe the ache that whispered in the back of his mind, "You are alone." The voice was soft, almost gentle, but persistent. It reminded him that none of it meant much if there was no one to share it with. As they drove through the city, Vincent noticed the holiday decorations draped between lampposts, the strings of lights outlining storefront windows, and the evergreens planted in big wooden crates along the sidewalks. He saw children pressing their faces against glass, marveling at window displays of toy trains and nutcrackers. He remembered standing at those very displays as a boy, wide-eyed, and hoping someone, anyone, would take notice of him. A sudden glow caught his eye. At a corner up ahead, a street vendor sold roasted chestnuts from a small cart, its bright lantern casting a warm pool of light on the piled-up snow. A young man in a wool cap handed a paper bag to an elderly lady, her hands trembling. With cold, the aroma of warm nuts drifted toward Vincent. He felt a pang of longing for something as simple as the smell of food cooked with care. He opened his eyes and glanced at Marcus, who was watching him in the rearview mirror. "Do you ever get tired of all this, Marcus?" he asked quietly. The constant rush, the deals, the meetings. Marcus smiled kindly. "Maybe, but it's the work that keeps us going, right? Besides, it makes it all the more special when we can slow down for a night like this." Vincent nodded, but he knew Marcus did not understand the depth of the longing he felt. For Marcus, slowing down meant a quiet ride home and a night spent with family. For Vincent, slowing down was a reminder of how rarely he did that. They turned onto a side street lined with brownstones. Each house was trimmed in lights and wreaths, and through the windows he could see families gathered around tables, children unwrapping gifts early, laughter spilling out into the cold night. There was a glow behind the glass that seemed to radiate comfort and belonging. Vincent felt his chest tighten. His own home was just up the block. The mansion's windows were lit, its grand doorway draped with holly garlands. There were wreaths on every door, and the sound of the piano drifting faintly from inside. He could imagine the butler warming milk for the household staff, the chef stoking the kitchen fire in preparation for Christmas dinner. It was a scene that would look perfect in a holiday postcard, yet he hesitated. The car slowed as they approached the long driveway. Vincent stared ahead at the ornate gates, at the stone walls, at the path cleared of snow. He felt a sudden restlessness, a tug pulling him in another direction. He wasn't ready for the silence that awaited him inside those walls. He wasn't ready for the careful etiquette of a dinner where every smile was measured and every conversation rehearsed. Marcus parked the car. Vincent watched the driver shut off the engine, then looked back out at the street. The world beyond. His home felt alive and unpredictable, felt drawn to it, as if the city itself was calling him to step out of the gilded cage he had built. He reached for the door handle, his coat falling open slightly as he leaned forward. For a moment, he wondered what it would be like to walk away from all of it, to put one foot in the unknown, to follow that small voice in his heart that said there was more to life than wealth and success. He thought of the children playing in the window displays, the street vendor and his roasting chestnuts, the gentle smile of Marcus as he watched him in the mirror. Something inside him stirred. Then, almost without thinking, he opened the door and stepped out into the cold night. The snow greeted his boots, and the city lights danced on the icy pavement. He closed the door softly behind him, leaving the car and its warmth behind. He looked up at the sky, heavy with snow clouds, and breathed deeply. In that quiet moment, he made a choice. He would not go home yet. He would walk these streets until he found whatever it was he was truly missing. And as he set off into the falling snow, the ache in his chest felt less like a reminder of his loneliness and more like a compass guiding him toward something he had never dared to seek. Vincent kept walking through the soft snow, leaving behind the warm glow of his mansion and the quiet hum of the city's richer neighborhoods. His boots crunched on the fresh layer of white, and each step felt new, as if he were rediscovering his life. The street lamps cast a gentle golden light on the falling snowflakes, creating small halos that danced around him. He pulled his coat tighter and kept moving, though he did not know exactly where he was going, only knew he could not go home yet. After a few blocks of empty sidewalks and shuttered storefronts, Vincent heard a faint noise. He paused and listened. It sounded like soft sniffles, maybe the rustle of water bottles in plastic bags. He turned down an alley lit only by a single flickering lamp. The ground was littered with cardboard boxes and broken crates, the smell of damp garbage mixed with the crisp winter air. His heart pounded as he realized someone might be in trouble. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning the shadows. Then he saw her. A little girl crouched beside a metal dumpster, her thin coat dusted in snow, her small hands searching through scraps of trash. Looked no older than 8, and her face was streaked with tears and dirt. Her hair tangled, and frozen at the ends, hid part of her face. She seemed frightened, but hunger drove her to keep looking through the refuse. Vincent's chest tightened, felt an urgent need to help her, to make sure she was safe. He knelt on the cold pavement, careful not to scare her away. "Hey there," he said gently, holding out his gloved hand so she could see he meant no harm. "Are you okay?" At first she froze. Then she tightened her grip on a soggy piece of bread. Her big eyes, dark and scared, met his for just a moment. Fear flickered across her small face, and she shook her head. She pressed the bread to her chest and scooted back a few inches, as if she might disappear into the shadows. Vincent stayed. Still and soft-spoke. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered. "My name is Vincent. I want to help you. Can you tell me your name?" The girl hesitated. Then she swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "Maria," she said, her voice barely louder than the rustle of the wind. "Maria," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's a beautiful name." He smiled kindly. "Ow. Do you mind if I sit beside you for a moment?" She didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. Vincent sat slowly on the pavement. Leaving room between them, he kept his voice calm and gentle. "It's very cold tonight. Are you hungry?" Maria looked down at the bread in her hands and nodded. Her stomach rumbled loudly, echoing in the empty alley. Vincent watched her, his heart aching. He knew hunger. He'd once felt its desperate pull. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small thermos and a paper napkin. "I have some soup here," he said, lifting the lid. The steam curled upward in the cold air. He held the steaming rim near her nose for a moment so she could smell it. Maria's eyes widened. She stared at the hot soup, then at Vincent's kind face. His hand offered the paper napkin and a spoon. She hesitated, then took both and cupped them in her small hands. Her fingers shook as she lifted a spoonful of soup and blew on it, then brought it to her lips. The warmth went straight to her face, and a small gasp escaped her mouth. Vincent watched as she ate. He felt relief and a deep sorrow all at once. He poured a little more soup into her napkin-lined bowl so it wouldn't spill. When she finished, she reached back toward the dumpster, as if she wanted more scraps. "Maria," Vincent said softly, "you don't need to go back to the trash. You can come with me." She looked at him, confusion and fear in her eyes. "I know you're scared, but I promise I will not hurt you. Let me help you." She met his gaze, searching for any sign of trickery. Vincent kept his eyes steady and calm. "My car is just around the corner. It's warm and I have clothes that will fit you. Won't have to be cold or hungry again tonight." Maria's lower lip trembled. Tears gathered in her eyes. She looked away, clutching the empty bowl. Vincent reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe." After a long moment, she set the bowl aside and stood slowly. Her coat hung limp on her frail frame. Vincent rose too and held out his gloved hand again. She hesitated, then placed her small hand in his. His glove swallowed her fingers, and he felt the weight of her trust. Together, they walked back to the main street. As they turned the corner, Vincent saw his car parked under a bright streetlight. He opened the back door for Maria and guided her inside. She slid onto the warm leather seat, her eyes wide as she looked around. Vincent knelt beside her and wrapped his scarf around her shoulders. The thick wool felt soft and comforting against her cold coat. "Do you like that?" he asked. She nodded, holding the scarf tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled and stood. "I'll be right back." He walked to the other side of the car, opened the front door, and slid into the driver's seat. Marcus looked at him in the rearview mirror, surprise clear on his face. "Sir," Marcus said quietly. Vincent nodded toward the back seat. Marcus turned and saw Maria huddled under the scarf. He blinked in surprise. "You found her in the trash?" he asked. Vincent nodded, his voice warm. "Her name is Maria. She's hungry and cold. Let's take her somewhere safe." Marcus didn't hesitate, closed the front door and started the engine. The car glided quietly through the snowy streets, past locked gates and holiday lights. Maria hugged her knees, her wide eyes watching the city go by. Vincent sat beside her, giving her gentle reassurance with a soft smile. They drove far from the glittering mansions and busy shopping districts to a modest neighborhood where the streets were quieter. The houses here were smaller, but each one glowed with light and holiday cheer through frosted windows. Vincent thought of where they could go. He dialed his assistant on his phone. "Clara, it's Vincent," he said softly. "I need the guest suite prepared. No questions. Just do it." His assistant's calm voice replied, "Of course, sir. I'll have everything ready within the hour." He hung up and smiled at Maria. "You won't have to stay in alleys or eat from the trash again, promise." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both fear and hope. You don't have to talk if you don't want to," he said. "I just want you to know you're safe." The car stopped in front of his mansion's side entrance, the one reserved for staff. The snow had been cleared from the path, and the door opened for them. A butler in a crisp uniform appeared and held out his hand to Maria. "Welcome," the butler said softly. "Sir asked me to take you inside and get you something warm to wear." Maria hesitated, then stepped forward. Vincent watched her go, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. He knew this moment would change both their lives forever. As he followed them into the house, he wondered what tomorrow would bring, and whether the warmth he felt now would stay long after the snow melted and Christmas Eve became another memory. Vincent watched as the butler led Maria down a long, carpeted hallway toward a small, warmly lit guest suite. Her tiny hand slipped from his as she followed, and he slowed to let her walk beside him again. The walls were lined with family portraits, smiling. Faces from generations past, yet none looked as surprised or hopeful as Maria seemed now. Vincent realized that while his home had always been beautifully decorated and carefully arranged, it had never truly felt like a place where someone new could belong. Tonight, everything felt different. Sighed the sweet, soft light spilled from a crystal lamp onto a plush armchair in a neatly made bed. The walls were painted a gentle cream, and a vase of fresh flowers sat on a side table. Maria's eyes widened as she took it all in, her gaze settling on a stack of fluffy towels and a basket of pajamas. A warm robe and slippers were placed. On the foot of the bed, and a tray of hot cocoa and cookies waited by the window. The butler gently guided her to the armchair. "Please, sit here," he said kindly. "We'll get you ready while you warm up." Maria nodded and sat, pulling the soft robe close around her. She tucked her feet into the slippers and wrapped the fluffy towel around her shoulders like a cloak. Vincent knelt beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. He could see the trembling in her hands, even though they were covered by the robe's sleeves. "It's okay," Vincent said gently. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you." She looked at him, and for the first time since he found her, she smiled a little. Her teeth shone white against her rosy cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. I'm hungry again," Vincent nodded. "Of course. Would you like more soup? Or something different?" Maria glanced at the tray of hot cocoa and cookies. She looked back at Vincent. "Soup, please." He called to the butler, who nodded and left through a small door that led to the kitchen. Within minutes, the butler returned with a bowl of creamy vegetable soup. Steam curled upward, and the rich aroma of carrots and potatoes filled the room. Maria held the bowl with both hands and took a careful sip. Her eyes closed as warmth spread through her chest. Vincent watched, a smile playing at his lips. "Take your time," he said. "There's no rush." As Maria ate, Vincent looked around the suite. He noticed a small bookshelf filled with children's books and a desk with art supplies. On the wall hung a framed painting of a snowy village, its soft colors giving a sense of peace. He walked over and picked up one of the books, a story about a girl who finds a magic key, and flipped through its illustrated pages. When Maria finished her soup, she set down the empty bowl and looked up at Vincent. "This is nice," she said softly. "I didn't know homes could be like this." Vincent sat back on the armchair's edge. "Homes can be many things," he said. "Safe, warm, filled with kindness. "I hope this one can be that for you." She smiled again, a genuine expression of comfort and wonder. "Will I stay here?" she asked, her voice small. He nodded gently. "Yes, at least for tonight. We'll figure out tomorrow, okay?" Nodded, then looked down at her hands. "My aunt, she hurt me. She said I was a burden. I ran away. But I didn't know where to go." Her voice shook as she spoke, and tears welled in her eyes. Vincent's chest tightened. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "No one should ever make you feel like a burden," he said softly. "You deserve love and care. I'm glad you came to me." Maria looked up, searching his eyes. She seemed to study his face, perhaps looking for a lie, but found none. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, wiping a tear away. He smiled gently. "Because everyone deserves kindness. Because on a night like this, nobody should be cold or alone. I once felt alone on Christmas Eve, too. I know how hard it can be." She leaned forward. You were alone," he nodded. "I had a big house, but no family around. I learned that Christmas isn't just about gifts. It's about people." He paused. "I may have wealth, but I've never been richer than I feel right now, having you here." Maria's eyes softened, and she hugged the robe around herself. Vincent realized she had wrapped the robe so tightly that her arms crossed at her chest. He chuckled softly, and she smiled shyly. The butler returned quietly with a tray of warm milk and a small plate of fresh fruit. He set it down on a side table and gave Maria a gentle nod. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Maria picked up a strawberry and took a bite. Its sweetness made her eyes light up. Vincent watched her eat, feeling a sense of joy he had not known in years. He realized that his life, full of boardrooms and endless meetings, had never given him a moment so pure. After a while, Maria's eyelids grew heavy. She leaned back in the armchair and yawned. Vincent stood and fetched a soft blanket from the bed. He draped it over her legs, tucking it around her like a cocoon. She closed her eyes, her breathing steady. Vincent looked at her sleeping figure and felt a protective warmth in his heart. He thought about the board members who had applauded him hours ago and wondered if they would understand why he had left the party. He thought about the empty holidays he'd spent looking at decorations through car windows. He thought about Maria, who deserved a childhood filled with warmth. He tiptoed to the door and gently closed it behind him. In the hallway, the butler stood waiting. Vincent nodded, and the butler followed him silently back to the lounge area. Vincent settled into a leather armchair by the fireplace. The fire crackled softly, sending flickers of light across the room. He folded his hands in his lap and closed his eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of the night's events. He had found a hungry girl in the trash and brought her into his home. He had offered her safety and kindness. And in return, he felt something stir inside him. Purpose beyond profit and success. Minutes passed. Vincent opened his eyes and glanced at the grandfather clock on the mantel. It was nearly midnight. Outside, snow still fell in gentle flurries. Inside, the warmth of the fire made the room feel like a sanctuary. He thought of tomorrow, the news that would spread through the city, the questions from his board and his family, the challenges of finding a permanent solution for Maria. But he also thought of her smile, her soft thank you, her peaceful sleep. He knew that whatever came next, he had done the right thing. He stood and walked back to the guest suite. Peeking in, he saw Maria curled under the blanket, breathing softly in sleep. He smiled and quietly closed the door again as he walked. Back to the lounge, he felt lighter than he had in years. The night's cold had been replaced by a warmth deeper than any money could buy. In that moment, Vincent Carrington knew that this Christmas Eve would change his life forever, and Maria's too. He had found a hungry girl in the trash, but more importantly, he had found his own heart. And as the fire crackled and the snow fell outside, he felt hope for the first time in a long time. Vincent woke early on Christmas morning, the chilly air of the guest suite rousing him from a restless sleep. He dressed in a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, wanting to keep the day light and unpretentious. The events of the night before still felt like a dream. He slipped out into the hallway, where a soft glow from the drawing room's fireplace spilled through the door's crack. He paused there for a moment, letting the warmth wash over him, and thought of Maria sleeping just down the hall, safe and warm for the first time in weeks. He walked to the kitchen doorway where his chef, Lena, and her small team were bustling. A large wooden table in the center held platters of fresh fruit, warm croissants, and steaming dishes, the beginning of a gentle holiday feast. When she saw him, Elena's eyes widened in surprise and delight. "Good morning, sir," she said. Quietly, "I hope you slept well." Vincent nodded. "Thank you. I have a special guest this morning. I'd like to share this breakfast with her, if that's all right." Elena's smile grew. "Of course. I'll bring the tray to her suite." She motioned to an assistant who carried a silver tray elsewhere. Vincent turned and continued down the hallway toward Maria's room. As he approached, he heard her soft voice reciting words from a book. He paused at the door and gently knocked. "Maria," he whispered. She looked up, her hair tousled and cheeks rosy with sleep. She wore the pajamas Elena had laid out light blue with small white snowflakes. She gave a shy smile and set aside the picture book she had been reading. "Good morning, Mr. Carrington." He knelt beside her. "Good morning. Are you hungry?" She nodded and followed him back down the hall to the drawing room, where the fire crackled and morning light filtered through frosted windows. Elena's assistant stood by with the tray. Maria's eyes widened at the sight of the spread. Dishes of scrambled eggs with fresh herbs, bowls of sweet yogurt with honey, plates of warm cinnamon rolls, and pitchers of orange juice. The aroma of coffee and baked bread made her stomach rumble again. "Please help yourself," Vincent said gently. He handed her a plate and watched as she chose each item carefully. Placing a small roll, a spoonful of eggs, and a bit of fruit, he poured orange juice into a tall glass and slid it toward her. They ate quietly side by side, the soft crackle of the fire filling the space between them. After breakfast, Vincent rose and held out his hand. "Would you like to meet my family?" Maria's eyes widened. "Family?" she repeated. She hesitated, then looked up at Vincent's kind face and nodded. Vincent led her through the marble-floored foyer into the formal dining room. At the large walnut table sat his two children, Olivia and Marcus Jr., their faces bright with curiosity. They had arrived early from their homes, drawn by their father's unusual invitation. Olivia wore a festive red sweater, and Marcus Jr. had on a green tie that matched the holly wreath draped on the chandelier above them. Their eyes went wide when they saw Maria standing next to Vincent. Olivia rose and moved toward her. "Hello." "I'm Olivia," she said softly, offering her hand. "We're so happy you're here." Maria shook Olivia's hand and nodded. "Thank you." Marcus Jr. followed, his tall frame bending to meet Maria's gaze. "Merry Christmas," he said. "I hope you like pancakes." On the table, a stack of fluffy pancakes sat under a glass dome, ready to be drizzled with maple syrup and dotted with fresh berries. Elena stood nearby, waiting to serve. Vincent seated Maria at the head of the table beside him an honor he reserved for his most cherished guests. He watched as Maria's eyes lit up at the pancakes, and he felt a swell of pride. He signaled to Elena, who lifted the dome and placed the pancakes before Maria, then filled a small pitcher with steaming syrup. Maria poured a gentle stream over the stack and broke off a bite. The taste of warm bread, sweet syrup, and tangy berry filled her mouth, and she closed her eyes with delight. Olivia looked at her father, a question in her eyes. Vincent gave a small nod, and Olivia turned to Maria. "Can I sit next to you?" Maria scooted over, making room. Olivia smiled as she took her seat. Marcus Jr. joined Vincent on the other side of Maria, and soon the table was filled with the chatter of a family discovering a new member. After breakfast, the front doors of the mansion opened to a soft knock. Vincent rose and crossed the polished floor to the entrance. Outside stood reporters and photographers, their cameras ready. Word of the billionaire taking in a homeless child had spread overnight, and the city wanted a story. Vincent took a deep breath, put on a calm smile, and stepped outside. "Mr. Carrington," the reporter began, "Can you tell us why you brought this child into your home?" He looked at the small group of reporters, then back at the mansions. "Dark windows? It was Christmas Eve," he said clearly. "I saw a child who needed help.
Ow!
I did what any person should do, offered her kindness and safety." Flashbulbs popped as he turned and walked back inside, the heavy doors closing behind him. He returned to the dining room, where he found his children comforting Maria, who had peeked through the curtains and seen the cameras. Olivia had wrapped an arm around Maria's shoulders. When Vincent entered, Maria looked worried. Vincent knelt beside her. "They're just curious," he said softly. "They want to know your story, but today we focus on being together." Maria nodded, and Vincent stood. "Let's exchange gifts," he suggested. "It's Christmas." Olivia brought forward a small package tied with red ribbon. "For you," she said, handing it to Maria. Maria unwrapped it carefully and gasped when she saw a soft teddy bear dressed in a tiny sweater. The bear's arms and legs were jointed so it could sit with her in bed. "I thought you might like a friend," Olivia explained. Maria hugged the bear tightly. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." Next, Marcus Jr. pulled out a thick notebook and a box of colored pencils. "For drawing," he said, "I know you like pictures." Maria's eyes lit up. She had never owned her own art supplies before. She opened the notebook and ran her fingers over the blank pages finally. Vincent reached under the table and brought out a gift wrapped in silver paper with a green bow. Maria looked at him, puzzled. He smiled and urged her to open it. Inside was a warm winter coat, much too large for her now, but with room to grow, lined with soft fleece and hooded with faux fur. Maria held up the coat and felt the plush fabric. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice trembling. He helped her slip the coat on. It hung low on her small frame, but it fit around her shoulders. Marcus Jr. stood and wrapped the scarf Vincent had first given Maria around her neck again, tucking the ends into the coat. "Now you're ready for any snowstorm," he teased. Gently, Maria looked at each of them with gratitude shining in her eyes. "I've never had anything like this," she said softly. "I don't know how to say thank you." Vincent squeezed her hand. "No need for words. Just be you." Morning turned to afternoon. The family gathered in the living room by the fire. Vincent's estranged sister, Elaine, arrived unexpectedly, having heard the news. She carried a box of homemade ornaments and a small wreath. She wrapped Maria in a hug when she saw her. Olivia and Marcus Jr. cheered at the reunion they had longed for. The room filled with laughter and gentle chatter, stories of past Christmases, shared memories, and new plans. Maria sat in an armchair, her teddy bear in her lap, and the winter coat hugged around her. She watched as everyone decorated the tree with old family ornaments and fresh wreaths. Vincent saw the wonder in her eyes. As colored lights blinked and glass baubles reflected the firelight, he understood that this moment was the gift he had always wanted, the gift of family, of belonging, of warmth that could not be bought. Late in the afternoon, soft snowflakes drifted against the windows. Vincent led Maria to the front door. He knelt and adjusted the coat's collar. "I have something else for you," he said, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. Maria took it and opened it slowly. Inside was an invitation, her name written in elegant script on a card that read, "You are welcome here any time. This house is your home." She looked at him, tears welling again. "I mean it," he said softly. "You have a place with us. Always." She hugged the card to her chest and stood on her tiptoes to hug him around the neck. Vincent felt her small arms tighten and knew that his life had changed. He had given her safety and kindness, but she had given him the greatest gift, her trust and her heart. As night fell and the mansion glowed with candles and lights, Vincent returned to the drawing room and paused by the window, gazed out. At the world beyond families, walking home with snow on their coats, children making snow angels in front yards, neighbors waving across fences. He felt a deep peace settle in him. He walked back to the fireplace where Maria sat, telling his children about her favorite storybook. He joined the circle and listened, the crackling fire casting soft shadows over their faces. In that warm, laughter-filled room, he understood that Christmas was not about grand gestures or wealth. but about small, true moments of connection. He looked at Maria's bright eyes, at his children's joyful smiles, and at his sister's gentle laugh. He knew that what he had done would shock the world, but to him, it felt like the most natural, most human thing he could have done. And, as he leaned back and let the warmth of the fire sink into his bones, he felt grateful for the unforgettable gift of that Christmas day. Vincent awoke the next morning, feeling a quiet joy he had never known. The previous day's warmth still lingered in his heart. He dressed more casually today, a soft navy sweater and comfortable slacks. He walked down the hall toward Maria's. Sweet. As he reached her door, he heard the soft sound of laughter. He paused and smiled. Inside, he saw Maria seated at a small table by the window. She held a paintbrush in her hand and smiled at him. The desk was covered with drawings of trees, houses, and families holding hands. A half-finished painting showed a snowy street lined with glowing lanterns. Vincent took in the colorful scene, and his chest warmed with pride. "Good morning," he said softly. Maria looked up. Her eyes were bright, and her cheeks were rosy. "Good morning," she replied. "I finished this," she said, pointing to the painting. "It's our street last night." He stepped closer and examined the painting. The snow was light, the lanterns golden, and the figures small, but full of joy. He saw himself and his children holding Maria's hand as they walked home under the lights. He felt a lump in his throat. "It's beautiful," he said, gently touching the paper. "You have a real talent." Maria's face glowed. "Thank you," she said. "Painting helps me feel happy." He nodded. "I'm glad." Maria set down the paintbrush and stood. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a tiny star pendant. "I made this for you," she said shyly, "to thank you."
Ow.
With emotion, he knelt to be at her level and accepted the necklace. The star was imperfect, the metal slightly uneven, but it shone with meaning. "Thank you, Maria," he whispered. "It's perfect." She smiled widely and hugged him. Vincent felt the true meaning of Christmas, the gift of love, the bond between two people from different worlds. Over the next few days, Vincent's life changed in many ways. He introduced Maria to his staff, inviting her to meet the head gardener in the greenhouse, the housekeeper who taught her how to make homemade bread, and the driver, Marcus, who showed her his favorite car models. Kind. Maria learned new skills and felt more at home with every passing hour. Vincent also spoke to social workers and legal advisors. He wanted to find a permanent home for Maria. No foster care or group home could match the warmth and stability she had found. He decided to adopt her legally, giving her the name Maria Carrington. He filled out forms, met with lawyers, and signed papers. On the day it became official, he took Maria's hand and led her into his study. The judge's letter was framed on his desk. Maria read it and looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm yours," she asked. He knelt beside her. "You're my daughter," he said. "I'm forever grateful you came into my life." She threw her arms around him and whispered, "Forever." Time passed. Seasons changed from winter to spring. Inside the mansion, Maria bloomed like a flower in sunlight. She went to a nearby school where she made new friends. She studied art and reading and excelled in her classes. Vincent attended her parent-teacher meetings, beaming with pride. His children, Olivia and Marcus Jr., often invited her to their homes for sleepovers. They taught her how to bake cookies, how to play board games, and how to laugh without fear. Outside, Vincent's company began a new project foundation named the Maria Hope Fund. Its mission was to help children who faced hardship and hunger. He announced the foundation at a gala held on a mild spring evening. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and soft music. Maria, now 10 years old, stood beside him wearing a light pink dress and a shy smile. When Vincent stepped to the podium, the crowd hushed. "Good evening," he began. "I stand here because of a child who taught me what true wealth means. Her name is Maria, and she showed me that kindness can change lives." He paused, eyes finding Maria's in the audience. She waved, her star necklace glinting in the light. He continued, "The Maria Hope Fund will provide meals, shelter, and education to children in need. Tonight I ask you to join me in giving hope to those who search for it in the darkness." As he spoke, donations poured in checks, pledges, and promises of support. The gallery filled with applause and tears. After the gala, Vincent and Maria walked through the rose garden behind the mansion. The flowers were in full bloom, their petals soft in the moonlight. Maria took his hand and looked up at him. "Thank you," she said simply. Vincent knelt and pulled her into a hug. "You've changed my life," he whispered. "You saved me." Maria smiled and pointed to the bright stars above. "Your turn to save others now." He smiled at her wisdom and stood. They walked. Back inside, the mansion glowing warmly behind them. Years went by. Maria grew into a confident young woman with a kind heart and artistic soul. She attended a local university on a scholarship provided by the foundation. She studied social work, determined to help children like herself. She visited struggling families, painted murals in community centers, and spoke at events where her story inspired others to act. Vincent watched her from his office window, feeling immense pride. He had built an empire of businesses, but his greatest achievement was Maria herself. He often thought back to that snowy Christmas Eve when he found her in the trash. A cold hole in the ground had held the warmth of a new beginning. He had taken her hand, and she had taken his, leading him toward a life of purpose. The foundation's impact grew. It opened shelters in other cities, provided thousands of meals each week, and supported education programs. Vincent traveled to remote villages, meeting families and children who had found hope through his donation. He listened to stories of transformation children who received backpacks filled with school supplies, teenagers who found mentors, and mothers who gained support in times of crisis. Yet his proudest moments were always those spent with Maria. He attended her art exhibitions, where she displayed paintings of children in gardens, families sharing meals, and tiny stars shining in dark skies. He sat in the front row at her graduation ceremony, smiling as she accepted her diploma. He hugged her when she became a mother herself, cradling her newborn daughter in his arms, and remembering the night he first held Maria's hand. On each Christmas Eve, they returned to the spot where he had found her. They placed a bouquet of white lilies beside the old dumpster, now fenced off and cleaned up. They lit a candle and said a prayer of thanks. Maria spoke softly about children still in need, and Vincent promised to keep helping them all. One such Christmas Eve, Maria's own daughter, little Sophia, handed her mother a handmade ornament shaped like a star. "For Christmas, just like you," Sophia said. Maria hugged her and slipped the ornament onto the branch. Vincent watched, tears in his eyes. He offered Maria his hand, and together the three of them stood beneath the falling snow, stars overhead, and a gentle warmth in their hearts. Vincent thought of the journey that had begun with a lonely billionaire and a hungry girl in the trash. He realized that life's greatest gifts come when we choose to see another's need and respond with compassion. Money could buy comfort, but only kindness could buy love and purpose. As the wind whispered through the trees, Maria looked at her father. "Thank you," she said again. He smiled and squeezed her hand. "No, thank you," he replied, "for showing me how to live." And there, on that snowy Christmas Eve, surrounded by love and the promise of a new generation, Vincent Carrington understood that the greatest miracle of all was the human heart's ability to heal and to hope.